Welcome to Without Regret, the podcast where stories of resilience and redemption take center stage. I'm your host, Tamara, and in each episode, we delve into the lives of individuals who have faced adversity head on and emerged stronger on the other side. Today, we're honored to share the remarkable journey of Michelle Shekhinah, a survivor whose life took an unexpected turn in 2014. What began as a fairy tale marriage soon turned into a nightmare of abuse and exploitation. But in the face of unimaginable darkness, Michelle found the courage to break free and reclaim her life. Join us as we explore her path from despair to empowerment, from victim to advocate. Through her resilience, she not only saved herself, but has also become a beacon of hope for others who have experienced trauma and abuse. Get ready to be inspired, moved, and uplifted in part one of Michelle's story. This is Without Regret. Hello. Hi, can you say your last name for me?
Shekhinah.
Shekhinah. Okay, got it. Thank you.
And that's really not my last name, just FYI.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm sure you'll explain all of that.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, let's start, 97 when you married who you thought was your knight in shining armor. Let's start there.
Okay. Oh, you're me. Oh, no, I have to. Just kidding. It's been one of those days. Yes, I will, definitely. He's just alive. So my name is Michelle Shekhinah. It's actually not Michelle Shekhinah, but that's an alias that I have to use, unfortunately, for now, because I'm dealing with a very sketchy, dangerous person. The last name was chosen for me by a friend of mine, and the name Shekhinah comes from the Bible or what have you, and it means like almost in God's presence, or you could say the universe, or something where it's kind of like a holy presence. There's strength, there's kindness, there's love, all of that.
Okay.
I kind of think of it as like, I think of it kind of like as a warrior woman, but she's got all of these great traits and values because that's what I've learned in this process. So a long, long time ago, we could start with the beginning, essentially. I came from a very traditional household. I'm the youngest of a lot of kids. It was traditional in the sense where my father had a business, he's a professional, and my mother helped run the office. And, it was back in the 70s where there were no books, or the books were like, you let you're a little stern with your children. And the children listen to everything you say, and if not, there's consequences. And that's kind of what they did. So, again, being the youngest of all the siblings, I had to deal with all of that too growing up. So around 22, I became my own profession. I'm a licensed healthcare worker, and I became very independent. I was working and helping people and healing my patients and making my own money as a woman. Back in the day, I had my own place. And what was really missing, and of course, in certain cultures, it's, oh, you have to get married and have kids and all of that. So I thought, okay, that's the next step. Well, my parents were friends with this other couple who the woman happened to need to come into my father's office to get some treatment. And she met me and was like, oh, you're single, I have a son. And, at first I was not okay with that. And then she kind of talked me into it. And essentially he and I met over the phone. And this was before the internet and cell phones, and there was no social media, of course. And so it was kind of based on an old picture of his, and he had no idea what I looked like. Well, we met, and then within a couple of months, he proposed to me in front of 100 people. And let's just put it out there, ladies, that is not chivalrous. That is a red flag. And that being said, he wanted to get married immediately. And I said, whoa, no, that's not going to happen. And a year later, let's say we got married. And then within a year of that, we got married, moved into a home, started a business, and started a family. So we were locked and loaded. I was already into this within a year and a half of knowing this person. And everything was great for quite a while. We had our first child. We had two sets of grandparents that wanted to watch that baby. And, he was like, okay, great. we're going to go out with my work buddies and their wives and what have you, and we're going to go to a club and go dancing. And I thought, okay, new mama. I was starting to feel better about myself, putting on clothes that were not, big t-shirts with formula and breast milk, all that stuff, And I thought, okay, great. Well, the second time we did, he hands this to me, or he puts actually right in my face, because it is his tactic. Is like, here, take this. And it was a pill of some sort. And I didn't know from this. My parents were very straight now; they still are. And and he puts it in my mouth, and he's like, just take it. You're fine. Just take it. And the natural reaction is to swallow because if something's in your
Mm-hmm.
mouth. And I was like, what was that? He's like, oh, it was just ecstasy. I'm like, what is that? I had no idea. I didn't even know. Remember, I'm like, at this point, I'm maybe 25. No, I'm sorry. I was 26, 27 years old, something in there. And again, professional, independent, doing very well for myself as a woman, all of these things, and a mother. And I start freaking out. And he's like, relax, it's okay. Everyone's doing it. You're good. All these people we're with, oh, they've done double that. I mean, at some point, I really did not feel well. Like I thought I was not going to be able to make it home. And the next day, I was like, please don't ever do that to me again. And, all of these different things. And we were fine for a while. It was very normal. We had, parties and sleepovers and family dinners and holiday parties and all of that. And everything looked normal. Then we had a second child. Um, I had miscarried in between, but then we had our second child, our youngest, and everything was great. Now, in between that time, our oldest one had come out with some developmental delays and some special needs and things like that. So now I'm in the school, in the elementary school, and I'm dealing with teachers and meetings and doctors and administrators and bullies. And so I'm doing that. Now we have our second child, and she's good. She was more on the flip side of the coin of that advancement and all of that. And so things were kind of settled again. We're back into what looked like a normal household. And I thought it was pretty normal because I made it such. The friends that we had were religious organizations. I was holding fundraisers. I was involved in a lot of women's things, religious things, and it was great. And then one day, something really tragic happened to me. I lost someone very close to me. And the kids were a little bit older. My daughter was a young teenager, maybe a tweenager, they call it. And I was devastated. And, she, they say like she was the yang to my yin kind of thing. And I came back from the funeral, of which I attended by myself. He didn't go. And I told him that, I really want to live my life to its fullest. And because you just don't know. I was 45 at the time, as was she. And she died suddenly. And I said, I want to live my life fullest. I want to experience everything. And I want to do it for myself and for her. And I didn't know really what that meant to him because I didn't know what he was doing without me knowing. Because at this point, he has a business. He goes out the door, walks out, comes home, sometimes has late night meetings, or he's running late, or he comes home to that 4-course meal on the table, like the quintessential meal on the table, but he's not hungry or whatever it is. And, I think it's okay. I think it's normal. He is starting to go away, and, goes to Vegas and gets massages in his room and parties at late at night. And I'm thinking, oh, he's convinced me this is normal because I don't know from this.
Right.
I did family trips. I never gone to Vegas. I never went with, a corporation to parties. I certainly would never get a massage by someone of the opposite sex in my hotel room. But I was really naive. And I said, I'm sorry your back's hurting you. I hope it helps you. When you come home, we'll take care of it. And I'm going to go take care of the kids. And I love you. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Now that I look at it, 20 years later,
Mm-hmm.
it's obvious. It's just obvious what went on. And I have since found a lot of Venmo payments to a lot of interesting women from all over. So he comes home and again, things are normal. holiday dinners and what have you. But now when we go out, he really wants to go out. So I say that he figuratively and literally took my hand and walked me down into a dark path, into a dark tunnel. And what existed there was alcohol, drugs, sexual deviance, and trafficking. And it was trafficking of me. And it started off very, very slowly. Listening to one of your podcasts about this just now,
Mm-hmm.
she explains it, and I explain it as the frog in the pot of water.
Right.
You put the frog in the hot water, it's going to jump out. But if you put in the cold water and slowly turn that dial, doesn't know that it's getting roasted and it's going to die. Well, that was me. That was me, and that was my life. And it was really, really sudden. So it was, let's go to dinner, let's have a few drinks, let's go to a bar and go home and be together.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go to dinner, let's go to a bar, let's go dancing. Then let's go to the strip joint and we'll just sit there and watch. And he's leading me, and he's really smart, because again, I'm a lightweight. So it's like, one drink, two drinks, okay, I could go home and go to sleep. So what he did was he started adding the drugs. And it's like I didn't know what I didn't know. What I did know was that my husband was all of a sudden now starting to not pay attention to me and put his attention on everybody else, whether it was men, women, the girls that were our waitresses, the girls at the bar, the men at the bar, the ones dancing. It was always someone else. There were a lot of times where we'd go to somewhere, the local hotspot, and we'd be sitting at a bar, and all of a sudden I'm in the corner, and I'm literally baby in the corner. Like I'm sitting there by myself. And I knew what he liked to look at, and I kind of became that. So what he would do is he would say to someone, "Here's my wife," and then he'd say, "Will you watch her for me?" And then he would leave and go to the men's restroom or go for a walk. And he would do this even like when he would take me to the exotic dance place. And first I was like, "Oh, that's chivalrous." I mean, this is like, again, clueless. At one point we were with one of these groups of friends that we met, and there was a new couple, and they were just newly married, and they were 10 years older than us and very well lived. And he said that to the husband and walked away. And the husband looked at me and said, "What did he just say?" And I said, "Well, he asked if you could watch me." And he looks at me and goes, "You're a grown woman. You're a middle-aged grown woman who's obviously very successful. You're a mother. What am I going to watch you for? That's really not a nice thing to say." And I said, "Oh, that wasn't just him being protective." And he's like, "No, that's a very degrading thing for him to say." And that's how much I was groomed and trained into all of these things, that I didn't even realize what he was doing was not normal. And then what happened was, there were groups of friends that we met that he knew from a friend of a friend. And there was just all this lifestyle was just everywhere. And, where I live, the clubs close when the sun's coming up or even later. Everyone's dressed very promiscuously, all of that. And it's just a rampant kind of lifestyle. And at this point, I'm just exhausted, because I'm still a mother of two and young children. Now they're teenagers, young teenagers. So we're out late at night, and there were some times when I didn't sleep, but for 2 to 4 hours a weekend. And then
Wow.
I would still have to run the show. Yeah, when I left, I was really sick. I was really sick. But going backwards, what happened was, all of these friends, he wanted to really impress everybody, because he's the type of person that really doesn't have an identity except for the one that he tries to emulate. And some of the guys started to see that. And, these were men that I thought were like my brothers, and the women like my sisters. But not soon, actually, this was 6 years long that this was going on, realized that my ex and all of these people had an agenda. And somewhere along that agenda, I became the pawn. And, I come in and I'm loving and I'm happy to see people. And before the night's over, somehow I end up with my shirt being ripped open or being put on a table or a counter, being told to be quiet, given so much that I can't even, there's no fight left in my body. There's no, like, I can't even figure out, I say it's like a whirlpool. You're in a whirlpool, you don't know which way is up. Or if you're at one of these interactive art museums and it's on the walls, like you don't know what's real and what's not real. And that's the kind of life I lived. And I say I was the circus animal and he was the ringleader, because it would be like, look what I could make my wife do. Or
Mhm.
look, this is what you can do to her. Even now, it baffles me that I went through that thing, because it also wasn't happening in public. It was happening in our bedroom also. He was doing some really sick, dangerous stuff to me, strangling me to the point where I would pass out and I would come to, which was a really scary experience. And he'd still be on top of me having sex,
Mm.
putting a belt around my neck from behind, and where I can't even fight that. And then going to the therapist that we went to, ironically, the next day, and telling, and you know and he would be like, you can't do that. And I said, I know, but I couldn't control him. And of course, then I heard that my ex had told the therapist that I wanted it and I wanted him to do it again. And so this is what happened. Like, he's in sales. So, I'd always say to him, don't try and sell me. Like, I could see that's what's going on, because it's really sharp. Um, and that would happen all over. Like, he would try and sell everybody. And there were a lot of people that saw through it, which I didn't know.
Mhm.
I thought that no one could see it and that I was the only one that knew something was wrong. The kids, I mean, it was a lot for me. And, the worst part was that those people that I thought that I could go to help me and protect me, they ended up being some of those that reaped me. And it's a hard word for me to say even now,
Oh
because
my.
I mean, I love them. I love them like they were my family. We used to call each other friends that are family. But they also said that we were the only two that were married and together for so long. And I think that eventually that was the goal, was to break us up. And I think that somewhere along that line, my ex-husband went ahead with that, because he definitely wanted a different lifestyle than I did. He's still living that lifestyle, which is how I know. Everyone knows he is. He's very proud of it. My kids know. Um, and, I'm pretty much a hermit. I'm really happy at home, writing and reading and watching TV and my dogs and going to work. But I realize, and thankfully, I have really close friends I've known since childhood, and they remind me that I'm not in the situation anymore. They remind me how strong I am. Um, they remind me that I'm worth feeling happiness. And, because the brainwashing was there too. I mean, at some point, he was like, if you disappear, nobody would miss you. You don't matter. And, I'm a healthcare worker, and I went back to work after not working because I had to support myself. And I went back during COVID.
Mm.
And I just went in and I was like, I'm going to do this and heal people. And I will tell you that that's what got me through all of that. Helping people and healing others really helps us. So, it got to a point where I got really scared in the end, because I was starting to have situations that I couldn't explain. Meaning, I would be out to dinner, one of his friends would get me a cocktail or whatever it was from the outside bar, come in, and within an hour, on the floor of a hotel within that shopping area, passed out on the floor, and I don't know how that happened. And my ex-husband would have my son come in and find me. That was definitely purposely done. So there were a lot of those. The last one was waking up in someone's bed in someone's house, and I had no idea how I got there. And, my ex would say some things like, make sure, when he was drunk, he would always come out. He would say he was a monster and a bad person. He would say, oh, you shouldn't sign the check, then you have no evidence, and you should drink water in between. Like, he would come out with these slur things that he would say, because he was I mean, it'd be 7 in the morning and he'd still be out of it. But that's when his confessions would come out. So I knew that I wasn't crazy because, of
Mhm.
course, that was his bottom line, you know?
Right, of course, yeah.
Yeah. And so when that started to escalate, which is the key word in all of this, is escalation. Whether it's, the gaslighting, whether it's the sexual deviance, or if it's the human trafficking that goes on, there's an escalation process because it starts off like a speck and then it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And when those things were happening, when I was afraid to be in my own home, I was afraid to eat anything, touch anything. I was like, I gotta leave. If I don't leave, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna be dead in a week. He would start coming out and saying stuff to me about, oh, does your boyfriend like this or that in front of my child? And she was 13. And my son, who, was a little older, and, they were really confused. But the thing about it is, I knew that he wouldn't hurt them. So when I did leave, I begged them to come with me and they wouldn't. So I knew I knew I was in a dangerous spot. He would say she's an alcoholic. He called all my friends. She's an alcoholic. She's a drug addict. She's cheating on me, like all of this stuff. I mean, who would put their wife in those kind of situations?
Right.
And, he would say to me, oh, I want you to be that cheating wife. I mean, obviously porn was huge for him. You know, I want to watch you pick someone up. I want to watch you pick someone up and take them in the bathroom for 7 minutes and then come out and tell me all about it. He would be in the bed and it'd be an intimate setting. And, let's just say I'd be on top of him and he'd want me to call him by other people's names and he would record me. So he has all of this blackmail. He would put me in situations and pictures like, oh, cover up so it looks like you guys were together and you were naked. And like and again, if I did these things, I would totally own up to that, but
Mhm.
that was not the case. And if I did do anything, all I wanted to do was to please him. I mean, it was people pleasing beyond because he was my life. He was my drug. So when I left to a safe house. The doors are all locked. Once you're in, it is safe. All you see are women, and all you see are women that look different in every range possible. I stood out like a sore thumb there. And, the demographic was very different than what I look like. And I sat in those chairs and I looked at all the women, and all I thought was, I am no different than them. Not at all.
Mhm.
And they're actually the ones that told me I was in a domestic violence situation. I couldn't even say the words. Even today,
Mhm.
it's just odd. And he would say that to me. He goes, I didn't abuse you. I never hit you. Well, let's see. Let's break this down. And that's when I learned about the control wheel or the power wheel. There was a hole in my wall, that there was a picture covered up, and I have pictures of that. There was glass at one point shattered all over my bedroom because he came and wasted and just punched the wall where the picture frame of us was. The emotional abuse. I mean, saying to someone, if you disappear, nobody will ever know or miss you. With somebody who has childhood wounds, and that's the one thing I didn't mention. So I've said it before, and it's very much Jeffrey Epstein's situation.
Mhm.
I wasn't 16, but they would play with the wounds that were exploited. And it would be like, oh, she wants attention. Let's give it to her. And he would like rip off my shirt and put drugs on me and be like, here, come get her.
So you've really only been out of this situation for a
Mhm.
couple of years.
I've been out for almost 5,
Almost 5,
but
okay.
almost 5. But I will tell you that it hasn't stopped. It looks different. The fear is
Mhm.
always there. I mean, he had people following me. There was a tracker in my car that I found, which my attorney has. There were lotions. There was a numbing cream that I found that he had. There are reasons why a man would have numbing cream. I'll let you all think about that. And again, being a healthcare clinician, when there's a couple of cc's missing from a syringe, I would notice.
Mhm.
um, and things would have happened to me that normally wouldn't. So I would put two and two together. So
Yeah.
it was a really, really scary situation. When I left and I was living in the safe house, after a couple of days, what would happen was I realized that my body started going through some sort of withdrawal symptom. because, I know my body very well. So when you're starting to have fever and chills and stomach aches and everything's just kind of, coming out of your system, like my legs would go numb. I knew that there were things in me that I didn't know what was there. I remember I never made my own drinks. Um, when I felt safe enough to get medical help, I did. I was really concerned as much as I wanted to go to the hospital. I was concerned that if they found anything, my daughter would be taken away from me. And because he would tell me that I'm going to take your
Mm-hmm.
kids away from you. I've already got a house where they're going to be safe. Like he had all this planned. In our bank account, there was less than $1, less than $1. And he had all other accounts, with other
Mm-hmm.
people's names on them. So I couldn't touch them. I have credit cards in my name that I'm responsible for. I didn't know. So it wasn't just physical abuse. It was emotional. It was financial, the control for sure. And always with the pictures and the video, his phone everywhere. And I know one day it's all going to come out and that's fine.
Yeah.
And that's fine. My kids know. I've told some of their friends, if this happens, I loved him. I would have done anything for him. Like I said, he was
Mm-hmm.
my drug. And that's the whole Stockholm syndrome. So that whole people pleasing that we have, it was to the extreme. Because of the environment, I had to really, what I thought, be on my game. I work with a different organization with domestic violence program. And now I'm working with a local university in a trauma program that, you have to be admitted to, and they do an assessment. And I really highly recommend, if anyone's gone through any sense of trauma, that you are working with people that aren't just therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, but they specialize in it, because it's a completely different kind of therapy that you need. Just different. It is deep rooted, it is soul driven, and it's just, it affects everything in my life now. To be quite honest, I've spent the last couple of months really being a hermit, and, being in my room. And yeah, it's kind of nice, but there's a whole world out there.
Are you
And
still
where
in the safe house?
No, okay, so what I did was I created my own. So within a month of
Okay.
leaving him, I started up with my career again, thankfully. And people, if you have a license, make sure you do your continuing education, keep it active. Sure enough, I was able to get right into that.
Oh,
And
God.
I was able to create an income, because now we have to be practical. There's emotional, there's intellectual, and there's physical reactions. So I had to get out of the emotional and I had to jump into the intellectual. What's it going to take for me to survive and thrive without him? What's it going to take? And even despite everything I've been through, let's get down to the nitty gritty. So I had to get an income, because any sort of monies that he was supposed to give me or whatnot, it's either not happened and or it's been late. So as much as I deserve that, I still need to make sure that I've covered my own back, because I'm also supporting my children to some extent.
And they're still with
So,
him?
well, no, because they're both adults now, thank
Oh,
God.
okay.
So, going back to the being at the house, so within a month and a half, I went back to work. Um, I did get a little bit of financial aid to get into my own apartment. I was able to get my child here, 50-50, got divorced. But at that point, I had saved up enough money, because I got really smart. I saved up enough money to where I could actually still survive financially, because these were things I never had to think about really. And it can still be scary, but that's where the support around you has to happen. Um, it's crucial. And that's the one thing I say. I was completely alienated from my large family, but
Mm-hmm.
he was in my ear constantly, and he was jealous of some of them, and so he didn't want to be around them, or he hated them because of how he felt about himself. So he would alienate them. At some point, he didn't let my parents see my children for almost a year, and they lived 10 minutes away. Who does that? You know,
Yeah. Somebody who is controlling.
right?
And that
Exactly.
was
So
he was isolating you.
Oh, completely. So what
Yeah.
did I do? I ran to the friends that say, "Oh, we're friends that are family. Come, and we'll love
Mm.
you." These are the girls that look beautiful. They've been friends for years, and here I come, the outsider, and they're like, "It's the mean girl syndrome." I say, "It's come sit with us. Come eat with us. Come sit at our lunch table." we'll wrap our arms around you, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and the guys too. They did it with him, but more so they did it with me as, I thought they were like my brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But as I told you, that's wasn't the case, unfortunately. Because I was that naive back then, thinking that good people that seem like they are, but they're not. They're not, or
Mm-hmm.
they weren't, especially not in that environment.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was sad. It was really that's actually one of the hardest things for me is the betrayal of those that called me their friends, their girlfriends, the guys that they're like, oh, we hate your husband or whatever it is. And but that's not really the truth. um
Do you think they were being manipulated by him?
well, they were being manipulated by him in the sense that he always came with a supply
Mm.
of me. And he came with a supply of drugs. And he always made sure everybody was in an alternate state. Now, some of them had their own, I guess, or whatever. And I don't want to talk badly about anyone. I'm just telling my story and my truth. And I'm not here
Right.
to
Yeah.
throw anyone under the bus. I mean, there are some influential people that I was hanging around with, and that could be scary too. Hence the Jeffrey Epstein story. But that's not my purpose here. My purpose is to tell my story, to heal myself and to help heal other people.
Right.
And
Right.
even my ex-husband, listen, whatever's going to come to him, I wish him the best. And I hope that he's here to see my children walk down the aisle, whatever they're going to do, you know? Um,
That's
cause
awfully
he's,
nice of you.
well, you know what? What's it going to do for me to hate him?
I, that's very
Nothing.
true. That's
It's
very
really not,
true.
it's not going to help me. And, I've been doing the quote unquote work on myself since I was a kid. I was raised going to therapies, and, I grew up watching Oprah, and even after, like we did, like he and I even did seminars together and things like that. And I'm always reading and listening to Audible things. And, because a lot of the times my head will start spinning into the ruminating thoughts. The OCD is one of the diagnoses that I have now. And it's not like I need things perfectly, whatever. It's the thoughts. It's
Mm-hmm.
the what did they do? Why did they do that? And it's the situation. I'll have a flashback and I can't get out of my head. And, I'd be working on patients and like, boom, it would hit me. And I would have to learn all of these tactics to deal with it while I'm sitting in one spot working on somebody else and I can't move. I can't leave. I can't move. I'm on a time crunch, whatever it may be. And I need to be there present for my patient. So these are the things I talk to other people about that I've helped through. How do you get through this moment where, you're at your kid's school play and all of a sudden you get a flashback, and it could be, when you were a child and you were in a play and something had happened that evening when you got home, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the physiological reaction based on the emotional reaction or the thought is all the same, and that's your nervous system. We've all
Mm-hmm.
heard so much I'm so happy that there's so much awareness out there,
Mm-hmm.
because we all have something like that in us. And what I say is it's a number line from 0 to infinity, and you can put yourself on that trauma number line wherever you think that you belong. It could be
Mm-hmm.
something very, very small. It could be witnessing a car accident, but everyone's okay. But it's that moment. The dog was up red. It's that moment, that scary moment. And you might see someone almost get hit and be that it's because our brain, our body remembers. Um, and you have to work through that. So it looks a little different than mine. It looks very different than mine, but there still needs to be some sort of strategies and how to cope with all of that. So that's what I've been
Mm-hmm.
doing these last few years. I've been really doing that with myself, with my daughter. My son's a little bit, he's a little bit more feisty. My kids were told horrific stories about me by my ex-husband after. I mean, he told them that I was doing stuff with everybody. Apparently, skinny dipping was a thing for me. Like I skinny dipped this group of people, and he has pictures, which never came about. And my daughter, she was 13. She's like, Dad, like, how could mom be doing that? She was always volunteering in our school. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she would be the one that comes with the cookies and the reams of paper for the teachers. And I was PTA president and, at our religious organization, decorating for an event, volunteering. And he would come up with something. Again, that's the salesman in him.
Mm-hmm.
But my son kind of wanted to believe him because he wants him to be his hero. And, um, he's a veteran, my ex, and I had heard the story, and there are things that you hear and you believe that are true, and some you don't. This one I definitely believe is true, and it makes me a little bit on the sick side. Is that his grandfather, my ex's grandfather, was also a veteran, and he got the Purple Heart, and he had it displayed in his house, and he would tell people that was his Purple Heart.
Mm.
And so my son believed that. And, so now his dad is really his hero, wears his dog tag. So he's believing everything. So we were a little estranged for about a year. And he would block me, but every single day, and even now, I annoy him. And that's my goal, is to annoy my kids, is I would text him, invite him for dinner, call him. If I could get in that moment between blocking and unblocking and blocking again, I would do it. I would just send him like a heart or some sort of emoji, because even if he doesn't want to accept it, he knows it's there. And I
Mm-hmm.
was that mom that fought the school board, because as he got older, his special needs got worse for my son. And I
Mm.
was the one showing up. I was the one fighting in front of the school board. I was the one saying that my kid has rights. I was the one at the doctor's office with all of his medical issues. So he knew that that's who I really was, and he still does. And I'm just as annoying now as I was back then. And again, that's the goal. That's the goal of every mother should be. But
Yeah.
because as much as the kids hate it, it's they know that that's the connection, and that you'll. And I tell them, they know there's nothing that ever happened to me that I will leave them. Nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
forsaken, God forbid, something terminal, but I'll always be here. And going backwards, they realize that that is true, and that was really hard for me, because I've always been that mom that was like, your kids are my kids, and
Yeah.
let them come to my house. And, other parents that were getting divorced, they dropped their kids off for the weekend, and I wouldn't hear from them. And I would take care of their children. I would be like, you know what? It's okay. Even if we have to take the child to school on Monday, we'll take the child to school on Monday. We'll call the parent. We'll make sure everything's good, because all that mattered to me was that child was okay and knew that there was some sort of a normal environment. And that was mostly happening when all the stuff wasn't going on.
Mm-hmm.
But there was stuff going on. Not when the kids were in the house, but in that realm. Like, I really had to balance out those two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I will tell you, that was challenging. But I think there's something in us as women that really can make that distinction, where, like, what's real? What's real is getting up, telling my kids to brush their teeth, telling my kids to get the laundry and, put it in the washing machine or take it off the floor, clean it, that annoying mom. Or, I made you dinner, or, let's go to the grocery store. Because the workings of the house had to go on. Because
Mm-hmm.
he would be in bed. He would always be in bed. He'd come in the house, he'd eat, and he'd go right to bed and watch TV or fall asleep, which is why I knew something was going on outside.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when we would go out and come home and the sun was up, he would still do drugs. He would still do it. He'd want to be with me or whatever it was. And then he'd sleep until 4 or 5 o'clock the next afternoon and want to go out again. And I wouldn't have slept. So, I mean, when I did get tested, finally, I got, of course, a battery of testing. I got drug tested, I got STD tested, because there was that flip of the coin that he was interested in. And um, I got everything. And I had Epstein-Barr virus, which means your immunity is shot. You know, my cortisol level was through the roof, and my immunity, my bloods were low. I mean, like, it really physically affected me, all of that. And I've worked really hard on getting physically strong for myself, for my kids, all of that, in addition to the emotional. And I think when we have the foundation of being physically strong, we're really able mentally, more so, to handle the stuff that comes at us. So I find that that's really, really important.
This is where we'll end part one. And there are a couple of messages I want to leave you with. The first is that what Michelle has experienced is trafficking. It's not normal behavior. You're not crazy, and there is help out there. The second is to please believe survivors when they tell their stories. It can be easy to hear all of this chaos and just think, oh, she's just a jilted wife looking for revenge. But that's not the case. Michelle is in hiding. She isn't naming any names or even her location. She has nothing to gain by talking about this other than helping other women who are being abused. And I don't want to wait till the end of part 2 to talk about her foundation, From the Floor to the Door. That'll be explained in more detail in part 2, why it's called that, but you can visit our website, fromthefloortothedoor.com, for help. Stay tuned for part 2 in the coming days. Please be well. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in to Without Regret, the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe. Leave me a review wherever you get your podcast. That would be really awesome because that's how my podcast is going to get noticed. So that would be a huge help, or share it on your social media would be awesome as well. Thank you so much. This podcast is a Without Regret production, which is produced by me. Artwork is by me. Everything's by me except for that theme song. That's by a guy named Michael Bruguglio. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/withoutregretpodcast and on Instagram at without_regret_podcast. Thanks again.